It's 9:15 now. Today marks exactly a year since the devastating earthquake in Nepal that killed nearly 9,000 people and left thousands homeless. Today I'm joined by British survivors Ro and Tom Smith. But just before we hear from them, let's go live to our Richard Gaisford, who's in Nepal. Richard, of course, you were there a year ago.
Well, Lorraine, it is desperately sad because it feels very much like yesterday, and that's because very little's changed. Look at all these people living in temporary shelters still. There's about 4 million of them throughout Nepal living in conditions like this, many of them under plastic that was put up a year ago as a temporary measure to give them some respite from living outside, but they are still in it. Others have more permanent-looking tin shacks, but those are heating up like ovens in this hot weather. And these people, well, they just have no idea of when and if they're ever going to get into a home again. I think back a year to those awful scenes up at Everest, for instance, when those avalanches came down, the villagers that were buried, the climbers and Sherpas that were killed. Absolutely frightening what these people have all lived through. And if we look at some of the scenes we found a year ago, places like Bungamati to the south of Kathmandu, the temple there, the famous temple that had collapsed in the middle of the old town with all the buildings around it gone too. Well, when we go back a year on, we look and see that actually things haven't changed an awful lot, sadly. They've tidied it up, the bricks have been piled up, but, you know, no rebuilding has started. And that is the same throughout the whole country here. Last night they paused to think about the 9,000 people that died. They lit candles in Durbar Square here in Kathmandu and in other towns and cities across the country, thinking about those who were lost, but also praying for a better future, Lorraine.
Richard, thank you very much indeed. And I'm joined now by two survivors, Ro and Tom Smith. Very, very sad to see that a year on, you know, it's not that different. Now, tell me, where, the two of you, where were you when you heard the earthquake and you knew something had happened?
We went to Langtang Valley, so we were actually on top of a mountain.
Right.
So we had just climbed 5,000 metres and we're actually celebrating at the top of the mountain when the earthquake struck. Jeez. So it was quite surreal. We didn't really know what had happened at first. It's just the most disorientating thing. And we were just kind of thrown to the ground and literally thrown around like rag dolls. Gosh. And I just remember thinking, you know, what's happening? What's you know, you can't comprehend what's happening, really, can you?
No, not at all.
Yeah, you think it was probably the worst place to be, right on the top of the mountain, but it turned out that for us it was probably a better place to be because down in the valley is where a lot of the avalanche and landslides went down, so...
But you had to get yourself back from there and pretty chaotic scenes, I would imagine.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it was chaos. So there was quite a few people up on the mountain.
Right.
So everyone was just kind of wondering what had happened, so it was a bit chaotic up there. To sort of add further complication, a huge avalanche, which killed everybody below us, actually bounced back up the mountain. So we then got hit by that avalanche as well. So again, you're sort of in a situation of what's happening. It's kind of like the end of the world, really, had happened. And it took us 3 hours to get down, and that's when we realised it was an earthquake. So we saw huge cracks in the mountain, where the mountain had literally just split in half. That's kind of when we realised what it was, and then obviously getting down to sheer chaos, where the whole village just collapsed.
Yeah, someone had a satellite phone, so they managed to call down into the village and also to Kathmandu. And at that point, we realised that the earthquake, you know, how widespread it was, and actually the destruction across the whole country. And then
you had to stay outside, didn't you, that night? I mean, and you must have been, when you're outside and you're in a tent and this had happened, would you know every single movement? You'd be terrified.
Yeah, it was.
You'd just be waiting for it because you don't know. It might be another one, you just don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, there's a lot of aftershocks after a big earthquake, and yeah, so even sleeping at night time in the middle of the night, we'd get big aftershocks, so that you'd immediately be on edge, you know, and worrying, listening out for further avalanches.
Because there wasn't really the structure in place to help everybody, was there? I mean, it was just people doing their best.
Yeah, it really was.
Impossible situation.
Yeah, it really was. I think when you're in a situation like that, there's literally no help. There was people laying there with broken backs, brain injuries, and some people were literally just walking away because, you know, what can you do? And I remember there was a French guy, and he was just screaming, for somebody to help his wife. And Tom and some other Nepalese locals, plus our guide and porter, ended up just carrying her into a fallen building. And it wasn't safe in there, but it wasn't safe outside either, because obviously you had the risk of hypothermia. So, yeah, you're kind of forced to make very, very split decisions very, very quickly. which is really daunting and very scary. And
it's a year ago, but I'm sure it just feels like it happened yesterday to you. And the both of you, you know, you're sort of like adventurous types. I mean, you're up a mountain. Have you changed in that way? Do you think you've become more fearful as people? I mean, have you had problems with flashbacks and post-traumatic stress and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, we both suffered, you know, quite severely from post-traumatic stress when we returned. So, yeah, we were constantly getting flashbacks. It would almost like I'd be talking to you. However, there would be like a window pane in the way, and that would be the earthquake. So it was constantly there in my vision. I just couldn't get away from it. And then, you know, we would easily be triggered. It literally could be someone walking on a wooden floorboard, which suddenly, you know, I would just feel really scared, feel like I was in an earthquake, or a lorry passing by would set off a rumble. It was horrible.
Yeah, I think sleeping was quite difficult at first because you have a lot of dreams, and then the noises definitely would always trigger that feeling.
And I know that you want to help, as we all want to help, and you see it out there. It's absolutely heartbreaking that people are still living in those conditions. They really are. But I know that you do want to help. Part of that is you're going to write a book, I know, and at the moment getting funding for that. How's that going?
It's going well. Still got a long way to go.
Sure.
So I need to raise £15,000. So I think we're now up to £6,000.
Right.
So once we've actually raised the funds, the book will then get written. So I've got a team of writers that will be helping me.
Sure.
And then basically all of the sales, once the book has been written, will actually go back to Nepal.
That's great.
Yeah. So I've chosen two charities that are going to be helping. So
fantastic, because they do need it, and I don't want people to be put off by saying that it's still bad. The fact that it's still bad means that we actually do have to give them more help.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You know, that's the thing. You can't just leave it like that, because that's hellish.
No.
That people are living in those conditions. Absolutely horrific. It really is. Thank you both for coming in. I think you're remarkable, and it's amazing that you're here. Thank the Lord. Thank you very much indeed, and good luck with the book. Come back and tell us all about it.
I will. Thank you very much.